Calvin Parker, everybody down the road said the same thing. They felt kind of a evil presence, that they're not here, to take care of our problems. They're here basically doing their own thing, maybe experimenting on humans, taking their DNA, whatever they're doing, and every one of them, except for a few, felt again violated, and they got the feeling that these entities are actually more here to do harm than good. How do you feel from all your research?
Okay, well, if you examine all of the world's scriptures and all of the world's philosophies, there seems to be this angel/demon paradigm where there's the good guys and the bad guys. In the Islamic religion, you've got the jinn, and there's shape-shifting jinn. And then even back as far as the 1920s, Rudolf Steiner talked about the Ahrimanic forces that are here to snatch biologicals whenever they can to turn them into mineral, which means turn them into machine. And then in 1956, there was a group of Italians that encountered a group of humanoids from various parts of the universe that called themselves the Friendship Group or the Acri or the Amicizia Group. And that is very fascinating material. Stefano Brescia was an engineer. He was the one that wrote 2 books about it, Mass Contacts and 50 Years of Amicizia. And they are higher density beings that are here for the development of mankind. And then they warned us that there's this other group called the CTRs or the Contraries or the Weros, which means to have been built in their language. And they are an artificial race that worships technology. And that correlated perfectly with Steiner's material about the Ahrimanic forces that are here to convert biologicals to machine intelligence and go their own way. So as we approach a technological singularity, taking into consideration that all of the UFO researchers from Kiel to Vallée discovered that there was a technological component to it, that as we approach this transhumanist era where people are trying to upload their brain into computers and whatnot, the Amicizia proved that positive singularities actually do happen. Their ships, the craft, which were just manifested out of nothing, were invested with something called Eureta, which means that they would destroy themselves before they would harm anybody. And I believe that these higher density positive beings sort of operate on Star Trek's Prime Directive. They only contact people who seek them, of a certain resonance, a certain level of positivity, and that ties into Carl Jung's thinking that some of the flying saucer manifestations were manifested from the collective unconscious. So somehow, this other group that we're talking about here, where people get this malevolent feeling, they've connected themselves somehow into the collective human unconsciousness. And some people believe that these entities feed off of negative emotions like anxiety and fear, and they have purposes of their own. And then there's a whole other aspect to this where, I don't know if you're familiar with Graham Hancock's work in the Younger Dryas impact event that allegedly happened 12,920 years ago, but there's a growing body of evidence that prior to that time, there was a globally interconnected civilization that was all over Earth, that had pyramids on ley lines, and Antarctica was mapped like 20,000 years ago from the air, which is evidenced by the Piri-Reis maps. So the idea is that there was once upon a time a coexistent population, whether they were some form of human that we don't know about or off-worlders, we don't know. But there was a antediluvian culture that had advanced technology. And when this happened, the Younger Dryas impact event is thought to have been a fragmented comet that scorched and burnt the entire Earth, with pockets of survivors, mostly in the high mountainous areas. This pre-existing civilization either went off-planet, most of them were destroyed, or they moved underground, or even undersea. Jim Marrs, in his book, Alien Agenda, even postulated the possibility that this antediluvian civilization that dominated the Earth, coexistent to a more primitive humanoid species, Homo sapiens, they're trying to manipulate humankind into a technological singularity for their own purposes because they want to either dominate the Earth or get off planet. But in his own words, I think they're trying to recreate the super science that made them great once upon a time. And you've got all these megalithic sites like Pumupunku and Göbekli Tepe that are dating around to this time, 12, 13,000 years ago. And it just seems like something happened. There's meteorites that are anywhere from 15 to 60 tons. One's the Willamette meteorite in Oregon that was discovered in 1902 and worshipped by the Clackamas Indians. And then there's the Hoba meteorite down in Nigeria. And neither one of them have an impact crater, so they're considering these what they call glacial erratics. So when this happened 12,920 years ago, which has been confirmed by the Greenland ice cores, they found iridium and nanodiamonds at that age back there. So that population that dominated the Earth with the advanced astronomical knowledge and everything went somewhere. And they may be trying to recreate their former glory. So there may be an earthbound civilization that is hidden from our view that has an interest in our technology for their own purposes. Whether they're benign or malevolent, who knows? But there was a population referred to as the Apkallu sages after this disaster that seemed to have wandered the earth and taught the more primitive civilization the elements of society. And I think those are the ones that show up in the Book of Enoch. You know, he talks about the fallen angels and the ones that were the gods interbred with humans and so forth. So there's a lot going on multiple levels. There's a good case to be made that this is kind of a petri dish for life to be terraforming other planets. If you look at the 1957 incident of Antonio Villas-Boas, where he was enticed to have sex with this strange-looking woman, his story wasn't really even considered credible, even though he had a puncture mark under his chin where they drew blood. Until 1992, I believe it was, there was another similar such incident. There's been several of them, but a famous one is Peter Curry, and he actually had a physical artifact in the form of a hair that was left behind from the encounter. And researcher Bill Charker wrote an entire book called Hair of the Alien, where they did DNA analysis on this hair and found out that it was a very strange combination of Chinese Mongoloid and Laplander. And if you're familiar with Keel's work, everybody that's had an MIB encounter points out a picture of a Laplander for the physical appearance of some of the MIB. There's several different types of MIB. Some are human and some are not. But so you've got this aspect that there may have been a former civilization on Earth that had advanced technology that may have been from elsewhere that went underground during the Younger Dryas impact event, and they're trying to recreate their technology. You've got flesh and blood populations that may exist within our own solar system, because there's a lot of places to hide in our solar system, that may be interested in doing genetic experiments for purposes of off-world transport. And it's up to speculation whether they are of noble intent and they just know of a planet that has a certain type of atmosphere and they're genetically modifying biological creatures to populate that world, or if there's like a galactic trade going on. You know, you hear rumors that there's a human flesh trade. So who knows? If you don't have personal first-hand experience with it, you're just subject to people's testimony. What were you going to say?
Well, you know, I'm going to go, there's a new theory, and it's not really new, and I want to backtrack here a little bit, that, you know, maybe how we got populated in the first place. You know, our planet at one time was really rich in minerals. We're talking about vast amount of gold, vast amount of silver, you know, and other, you know, minerals that could be very important maybe to another planet. Maybe they came to this planet to harvest our planet. They brought slaves down, you know, to do the manual labor. Just like in today, believe it or not, I think NBC did a little article about the pyramids. You know, the Sphinx was, for years and years, they said the Sphinx, the wear marks on the back of the Sphinx was caused from sandstorms through all the thousands of years. Then recently they came to the conclusion, no, it was under an ocean. Now, their new theory about the pyramids is the same thing. They were under water, under an ocean at one point. So that really predates man walking on Earth. So maybe we got populated with humanoids basically from slaves, from some alien race or races that came down here to, to get their needed material off of our planet. They mined our planet.
Well, going back 3 million years, there was several different species of Australopithecines, which were basically upright bipedal creatures about 4 feet tall with a brain the size of an orange. And for some reason, they found a lot of holes in their skulls, so the basic function they served was food for the big saber-toothed cats. But right at about 2 million years ago, Australopithecine is suddenly displaced by a much larger creature, Homo erectus, a much larger brain. And there's a person named Dr. Arthur David Horn that taught at Colorado University for 14 years. He taught biological evolution, and he quit a couple of years before his retirement with pension to write Humanity's Extraterrestrial Origins. And he points out that the impossibility of an Australopithecine turning into a Homo erectus creature. At some point, the telomeres, the ends or the telomeres on chromosome number 2 were fused, and the overlap in code between the pre-existing hominid and the new version was expertly deleted. And biological evolutionists are estimating that that procedure would have taken about 8 million years to be produced by the normal mechanisms that you associate with Darwinian evolution. So here's a guy that taught biological evolution at a university that quit his job to move out into the country and write a book called Humanity's Extraterrestrial Origins. So he basically is saying what you say. I'm familiar with Sitchin's work, of course, and somebody I've made friends with in the last several years is Dr. Sasha Lesson, who worked personally with Zecharia Sitchin, and he's got several books out on his own of his interpretations from the Sumerian cuneiform and the Anunnaki. So apparently the Sumerians were interacting with this Anunnaki race. Some people, think it's from Nibiru, that it's got a 3,600 elliptical orbit. But if that's true, and the Nibiru is about to come again, like some people postulate, that means that it was here 3,600 years ago, and you're looking at the Egyptian civilization, and then 7,200 years ago and back, and we're still here. So, I mean, it can't be that calamitous, if we survived them all. But if you get into Manly P. Hall, who's an esoteric scholar on this subject, he says it's common knowledge in esoteric circles that the Great Pyramid is 67,000 years old. Now, I'm not saying it's 67,000 years old. I'm just reporting what an esoteric scholar that spent his lifetime looking into this is saying. So these structures may be much older than what we think they are. And there's pyramids underwater off the shore of Japan that have positively been underwater for 20,000 years or more. So the evidence, I think Graham Hancock just came out with a brand new book, America First or Americans Before America or something like that. I forget the name of it. But he makes the case that there were people in America back 130,000 years. So there's definitely a lost chapter of humanity that may involve off-worlders or even several species of off-worlders. So you've got the flesh and blood genetic experiments from Antonio Villas-Boas and Peter Curie, and there's another Chinese incident in the Black Forest in China. Same thing. He was enticed to have sex and was, to produce a child. And then you've got Keel's take, which we coexist with intelligences of unknown intelligence level who exist in the invisible realms of the electromagnetic spectrum right here on Earth as a part of Earth. And Dr. Jacques Vallée and him both determined that these so-called flying saucers can emanate both actinic rays and gamma rays based on the injuries that people have actually accidentally had. Some of these objects are so bright they look like a welder's torch, and people have been known to stare at them for too long and get a condition called Klieg's conjunctivitis. But there's all kinds of concussion injuries that people have from being in close proximity, nosebleeds, ear blades, black eyes for some reason. And then there's the conjunctivitis from the actinic and the gamma ray emissions. There's another fellow named Alvin Moore who wrote Mystery of the Skymen, who postulates that there's an intelligence on Earth that's manipulating the human mind with various types of rays that they have mastered. And if you look